Hello, social studies scholars. Mrs. Olson here. Today's lesson is a continuation of the Bill of Rights. So let's begin with our learning target, which is going to be the same throughout all of these lessons, and that is that you will be able to understand the principles established in the Bill of Rights. So our previous lessons have been about the different sections within the First Amendment, and now this lesson is going to focus on the Second and Third Amendments in the Bill of Rights. So make sure that you have a piece of paper and a writing utensil handy or another window open with a word processing document so that you can record important information. All right, everyone, here we go. The Second Amendment, the way that it is written exactly, says a well regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay, so for each amendment, I'm always going to have the way that it is written exactly so you can see the actual words that our forefathers wrote. So now we dive into what the Second Amendment, what this exactly means, okay? So here we go. The Second Amendment and the right to bear arms is interchangeable. What do I mean by that? When you read, say, a newspaper article or you are listening to somebody speak and they say something like the Second Amendment rights or our right to bear arms, these are the same thing. So the Second Amendment is about the right to bear arms. All right, everyone. Now, arms aren't really the arms that are attached to our human bodies. Arms refers to guns, okay? So weapons as in guns. All right. So what does this mean exactly, these words? Well, the Second Amendment guarantees that individual states have the right to maintain a well-regulated militia. So states in this case are the states in the United States, like the state of Washington that we all live in, state of Texas, state of California, right? So all of the individual states have the right to maintain. So they can train, they can pay, they can always make sure that they have an army. That's what the word militia means. A trained group of soldiers. Okay, so it guarantees citizens the right to keep and bear arms. So not only do individual states have the right to maintain a militia, it also allows citizens, US citizens, to keep, meaning that they can always have, and to also use the guns. That is what that means. Okay? Now, it says here that our founders wanted to be sure they preserved the right to bear arms as they established their new independent government. We always have to remember the situation of the lives of our forefathers that they lived as colonists when England was telling them what to do and even taking away some of the freedoms that they came to the United States for. Okay, so pause the video here if you need to write down this information before we go to the next slide. Okay, continuing with the Second Amendment, this note says that Americans asserted, so they had this idea and they carried out the idea of a natural right to defend. And so I'm going to give you a list of things that the Second Amendment says we have the right to defend. The first one is ourselves. So if we feel like we are in danger of someone hurting us or our family, and we have a gun, then the Second Amendment says that we are allowed to defend ourselves, to protect ourselves. Okay? We have the right to defend our properties if someone is trying to destruct our property. And we have the right to defend against any kind of tyranny. So tyranny means a country or a leader that is oppressive. They take away our rights. They are tyrannical. They don't allow us any of the freedoms or choices that we have right now. Okay, so against any kind of tyranny that is foreign, so outside of the United States, or domestic inside of the United States. So if a tyrannical leader takes away our freedoms, the way that we know them, understand them with the way that the Constitution is written, then the Second Amendment says that we have a right to defend ourselves with arms, with guns. Okay? And so that's just a graphic, really, of the same thing, the way that the Second Amendment is written. Okay, more stuff on the Second Amendment. So this is actually one of the most controversial amendments that has had many cases brought to court, including the Supreme Court. So if you've ever heard of the term gun control, that phrase is also interchangeable with the Second Amendment, gun control. So that is a hotly debated issue in our country because there are people that believe that we should have the right to bear any kind of arms. And then there is another group of people that believe that we should limit the types of weapons that people can own in the United States. Okay, so here it is. You might hear the controversy in this phrase, gun control. I wanted to make sure that that was in the text of the notes. And I said that people have debated the intentions of the Second Amendment. And those include like the types of guns that people are allowed to own, who exactly can have those guns, and where you can own certain guns. So the very bottom note says inner city versus rural. There have been some court cases, and it is actually still debated today on whether or not people, say, in the inner city should be able to own handguns. So think of that kind of as a gun that you can hold in your hand. It would be smaller than, say, a rifle. Okay, so I wanted to give you the examples of the types of debates that center around gun control and the Second Amendment. Okay, now we go on to the Third Amendment, and this one says, no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. So let's delve into what this one means exactly. Okay, one moment, guys. Okay, I had to take care of my animation so that we don't get ahead of ourselves too much. All right, so the Third Amendment is about housing troops. Does anybody remember the Intolerable Acts? The Quartering Act, to be exact? So what the Third Amendment says is that people are protected from government intrusion. So say, kind of busting open your door, if you will, and demanding that soldiers be um, quartered or be allowed quarters lodging in your house. So people are protected from government intrusion into their homes. That is the big idea of the Third Amendment, that the government cannot just barge into your house and say essentially that the soldiers and the army are going to stay in your daughter's bedroom. Okay, so once again, do you remember the Quartering Act? This is one of the intolerable acts. So in the late 1700s, the England was saying that the colonists had to allow British soldiers into their houses. The colonists had to let them sleep in their beds, eat their food, and make sure essentially that they were taken care of. So that's where this amendment comes from. Today, the federal government is most likely not going to ask us or make us house soldiers in our homes, even in time of war. Um, there are historians that have said that the Third Amendment is probably the amendment that is not going to ever be enforced upon us. It is probably the oldest idea that has not transitioned through modern times because we have different ways in which that we can take care of our soldiers. Okay. All right, so this is the same graphic that I used in first semester when we were learning about the Intolerable Acts, just to give you an idea that colonists had to allow British soldiers into their houses, even in the middle of the night. And that really isn't going to happen anymore. So I said, we have to remember when the Bill of Rights was written and the laws that had been forced upon the colonists. The writers of the Constitution wanted to make sure that every aspect of Americans' lives was free from a government's intrusion. So whether that be our own government or another government, we don't have to open our doors and make sure that our soldiers are taken care of because the government takes care of them in different ways and we're not responsible for that. All right, everyone, that ends the lesson on the Second and Third Amendments. Bye, guys.